Begin at the magic wall because I want to take us through some of these dramatic images we have seen. First, a reminder. As we watch the fallout in Iran, it is, of course, in one of the most unpredictable and volatile neighborhoods of the world. Iraq here, Afghanistan and Pakistan here. And the images we have seen, and as we said, we've just confirmed more protests today. Here are some images throughout the weekend. Rock throwing on the streets here. Those who support the candidate who lost the election, Mr. Mousavi. Flames and fire in the street. And I want to begin with you, Senator Lugar. You're one of the leading voices in this town on foreign policy. When you see these pictures and more protests today, even after the Supreme Leader said, stay out of the streets, are we seeing frustration at the election, or are we seeing the seeds of another Iranian revolution?
We're seeing a challenge of the regime. The leader, Khamenei, perhaps made a grievous error by making that the issue. In other words, he could have called for another election or for reforms or various other things, but in his speech on Friday, comprehensively, he said, now, out in the streets, you're indicating opposition to the state, to the regime itself. It's not a question of Mousavi or Ahmadinejad, it's me and the Supreme Council. So the protests have continued. The challenge continues, which is going to come to a conclusion one way or another, in which either the protesters bring about change or they are suppressed. And it's a potentially very brutal outcome at the end of the day.
And Senator Feinstein, you are the chairwoman of the Intelligence Committee. As we watch this very volatile situation unfold, do you believe, based on what you are being told by U.S. intelligence, is this regime's survival at stake? Is that at issue in the streets of Tehran?
Well, I think Senator Lugar said it correctly. I think what began as a challenge to the election has become a challenge to the leadership now. And I think the way the leadership has behaved is really terrible for a leadership that derives its authority from religion. And a president newly elected who calls hundreds of thousands of people who protest an election just dust. I mean, they threw the gauntlet to the people, essentially, when there was a way out for the Supreme Leader simply to say, so many people object to this election, we will do it over, and we will show that we can do an election correctly and with the people's confidence in our country. Instead, what you have is a total put-down by the leadership of what began as a legitimate protest, which has now turned into much more than that because of the brutality that the regime has shown to its people.
And one of the questions, of course, anytime you have a dramatic world event like this is, what is the role of the United States and what is the role of the U.S. president? Senator Grassley, I want to go to you because some Republicans and conservatives have said that President Obama has not been bold enough, that he should stand at the White House and tell those people in the streets risking their lives that he stands with them and that the people of the United States stand with them. I want you to listen to Senator John McCain and Congressman Mike Pence, two Republicans who say the president has this wrong.
On this issue, I do not believe that the president is taking a leadership that is incumbent upon an American president.
When Ronald Reagan went before the Brandenburg Gate, he did not say, Mr. Gorbachev, that wall is none of our business.
Senator Grassley, the president says to be more direct than he has been, and he has said the world is watching, and he has said he sees things that he believes are unjust by the Iranian regime. He says to go further would be to give a foil to Ahmadinejad and the Supreme Leader. How do you rate the president's performance on this one?
Well, I believe that we could be more forceful than we have, and I believe that the United States, being a democracy for 200 years, we've bragged about what we want to do, extending democracy around the world. We've been involved in the Philippines, in Bosnia, several other countries over the last several years, and actually being very forceful in promoting democracy. If America stands for democracy and all of these demonstrations are going on in Tehran and other cities over there, and people don't think that we really care, then obviously they're going to question, do we really believe in our principles? So wherever there's opportunity to promote democracy, it seems to me we ought to be in the forefront of that promotion, particularly when it comes from the grassroots demonstration that the people really want the ballot box to work and people to be elected honestly, as opposed to what looks like a charade that went on last weekend in Iran.
Senator Casey, you're on the Foreign Relations Committee. Has your friend, the president, been too timid here, as Senator Grassley suggests?
No, John, I think he's gotten it just right. The president, I think, has struck the right balance between making sure that we affirm and speak out in favor of the universal values of the freedom to assembly, the freedom of speech, all those important values that our history has taught us. But at this moment in the history of Iran, we should not politicize this issue here in the United States. The key thing here is striking the right balance, telling those who are protesting that we share their values, but also making sure that we keep our eye on the ball here. The biggest threat down the road in terms of our security and the security of the region is Iran's nuclear program. And the best way to approach that is to leave every option on the table, including the strong and tough diplomacy, but also, and the Congress plays a role in this especially, and I've been a leader on introducing legislation on sanctioning Iran, or at least giving the president the authority to provide, or to impose, I should say, sanctions on the Iranian regime if they continue to pursue a nuclear weapon strategy. So I think he's gotten the balance just right.
Well, on that point, I want to get up and walk over to the wall because I want to remind our viewers about the government structure in Iran. Senator Casey, you just say you believe diplomacy should stay an option. I want to show this flow chart just so the American people understand. President Ahmadinejad is down here in the structure, and President Obama has said he would like high-level diplomacy, even leaving the door open to a meeting with President Ahmadinejad early on in the administration. It is the supreme leader, of course, who calls the shots. The armed forces report to him. The state media reports to him. Senator Lugar, I want to come back to you on Senator Casey's point. The president said diplomacy should be on the table. He's been waiting for the Iranians to come back to him. If President Ahmadinejad or the supreme leader, Mr. Khamenei, came back now and said, we want to sit down with the United States at a high level, Secretary Clinton perhaps to the foreign minister, or president to president, should the United States say yes, or would you be rewarding the unjust, to use the president's word, behavior he sees on the streets of Iran right now?
We would sit down because our objective is to eliminate the nuclear program that is in Iran. This is
even though they are shooting people in the streets and beating people in the streets and arresting political opponents, if they called tomorrow, you would sit down with them?
Yes, it's totally improbable, and the reason is that this regime now is under fire. This is not a stable regime in which two people suddenly sit down with the United States. They may not be able to impose their will. This is what this is all about in the streets. But in direct answer to your question, of course, we really have to get into the nuclear weapons. We have to get into terrorism of Iran in other areas in the Middle East. Now, we have a new opportunity in which we might very well say, we want communication with Iran. We want openness of the press. We don't want to have to use Twitter. We want the press on the ground. In order to have any kind of a relationship, we need to be able to talk to people, hear from people, argue with people.